Hello everyone, it is time for NaNoWriMo writing again, day 15. My goal today is 37,500 words and I'm right at about 35,000, so the same about 2,500 that I need to get done today. I usually say I'm having a late start, but if you just start developing a pattern of start having a late start every day, then pretty much that's just the time you start. So I don't know if I can say that anymore until I get an earlier start again. Um, been working pretty hard today on the second book in my vampire novel trilogy that I got going on. I'm doing sort of the final read through on that. Normally I spread that out over several days, but I got so much work piled up from a number of different sources that I'm just trying to power through it today, and I still got a little less than 20 pages to do tonight, and then I can pass it off to the formatter to get all that done. So art's done, editing's done, and after that read through I can pass that off, so that'll be one less thing on my plate and I can get into all the other things I'm neglecting. So we'll make sure to get that done. So we're looking at Rise Again, a sci-fi novel by Jay Wilburn. We are currently on chapter 17. I debated going back and retrofitting a backstory for one of the characters to kind of push him forward. But I'm thinking it may be better to just introduce that element now and create sort of a scene where all these events sort of pile in together as they've been working on this particular world, which is very familiar to us but foreign to and alien to the characters we're following at this time. So we'll dive right into the story here. All right. Why didn't he just take her? Rick asked into his phone again. He'd asked this question of the doctors, and no sooner had he hung up before the preacher at his parents' church had called again. When the call first came in, I was sure it was Patrick or someone from the hospital calling on his behalf. It didn't take me long to figure out that something had gone terribly wrong for Rick and his family. I will, Rick said. Another pause. Okay. Yeah. I don't... Okay, let's do 2 eyes. I don't know when, though. Another pause. Yes, please. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Okay. He hung up and dropped the phone into one of his empty chairs as he paced through the room in a couple loops. Rick's eyes sort of bulged, and his face reddened. Trey took a deep breath, but I put a hand on his arm, and thankfully he didn't use that air to say anything that would make this worse. Okay. About 7 more laps of the room, and Rick stopped, facing his kitchen. I just do you want to talk about it? I asked. He turned to face us where we sat on his couch, but stared at us like he barely recognized either one. I suppose we were still strangers to him. He paced some more, but then sat down in his chair where he'd dropped the phone. Trey glanced at me, and I shook my head ever so slightly. He managed to keep his mouth closed a little bit longer. Finally, it was Rick who took a deep breath and said, "My mother died. I didn't even know she was sick. They didn't call. She had COVID. They both did. And they didn't call." Did they know they had it? I asked. Rick waved his hands out from his body in an abrupt way that had me bracing for him to yell. But then he covered his mouth and moisture glistened in his eyes. I waited for the tears to fall, but the accumulation never reached that level. His hands slid off his mouth and supported his head under his chin with his elbows on his knees. He looked so much like a lost child to me in that moment. Maybe that's what we all become when we're hit with news like that. I don't know, he said. I had almost forgotten my question. He continued, my dad is he's so stubborn. He won't go to the doctor for anything. So my mom doesn't go either. They were both caught up in all the right-wing bullshit about it not being real. What not being real? Trey couldn't contain himself any longer. The virus? They can look out the window and see it's real, right? We've only been in your world a few days, and I can tell it's real. I put my hand on his knee, hoping, let's do a comma there, hoping that he would get the signal to stop. They believe everything they see on Fox News, and everything that fucking president tells them. Did they go to the hospital? Finally, I asked. Rick took a couple shaky breaths, but still no tears. Maybe that was a thing men fought in every world. He said, my dad finally drove her, but it was already too late, I think. I'm not sure it would have made much difference if they maybe could have gotten her on a ventilator sooner, but my dad dropped her off and tried to drive home, even though he ended up driving off the road and has been in a coma or whatever since. My pastor from their church called. Then the doctor. Then I talked to the pastor again. After a long silence, I reached out and squeezed his arm. He blinked a few times and said, "My mom is dead, and my dad will probably be dead soon too. I can't go see them. Not even sure I would want to see him if I could. When he dies, I have to figure out something with the house, I guess. How do you handle a thing like that in times like these? we can help. I said, I don't know what we can do, but we'll be there to help if we can. His phone vibrated and he picked it up. He glanced at it a moment and then pocketed it. Hospital again, I guess. I can't talk to them right now. I can't even go to their funerals with all this, with all someone knocked on the door and then rang the bell in a rapid fire cadence that matched the knocking. Who is that? Trey leaned to the curtain. Rick stood and put on a mask as he walked down the short steps leading to his front door. Okay. I grabbed my mask up and handed Trey's to him. Rick opened the door to two masked men in suits and ties. They both opened folded bits of leather to show something to Rick. Rick opened the door to two masked men in suits and ties. They both opened folded bits of leather to show something to Rick. I could see Rick's profile, and I wasn't sure he even looked at what they showed him. He appeared to not be seeing anything at all. Okay. How crazy does this get before Rick Helms, one of the men asked. Rick Helms, one of the men asked. A car, hold on, a motorcycle roared by and I missed a bit of the conversation. One of the men finished talking and the other began. To ask you if you've seen or heard from your uncle today. My uncle? Oh, hold on. My mother died. She got COVID and died. They just called me. I didn't even know she was sick. Men exchanged a look. Sorry for your loss, son. Truly, I am. We've lost some good people, too, the other said. Rick started to push the door closed, but one of the men reached out and stopped it. Rick started to push the door closed, but one of the men reached out and stopped it. We're sorry to bother you at a time like this, but we really need to know the whereabouts of Patrick Overhill, the man you dropped off at the M-dash. Okay. I ran to the railing above the foyer and leaned over. What do you mean? What do you mean the whereabouts? He's in the hospital. He's supposed to be in the hospital. What happened? All right. What do you mean the whereabouts? He's in the hospital. He's supposed to be in the hospital. What happened? One of the men had reached under his coat. I had missed his name and credentials, but I assume he was... Oh shoot, what did she call them in her world? Oh gosh, hold on. Sorry about that. We'll write this down. Constabulary is what you call them. Assumed he was a constabulary. But I assume he was a constabulary of some type, or whatever they were called in this world. I also assume he was reaching for a weapon because I surprised him. I didn't care in that moment. What's your name, ma'am? My name doesn't matter. Well, it might. What happened to Patrick? Is he still in the hospital or not? Okay. What happened to Patrick? Is he still in the hospital or not? The one who I had startled into reaching for a weapon finally eased his hand out of his coat. He's not. Okay. If he had pulled the weapon or had been faster in his reaction to me, things might have gone differently for them. I replay those moments in my head a lot, but I can't seem to come up with a path. But I can't seem to come up with a path that leads to a different outcome. Maybe if Rick hadn't been on the phone, maybe if he hadn't answered the door, maybe if we'd invited them in sooner, maybe nothing at all. All right. Where is he now, then? We were hoping you might know. He was in the hospital for an infection in his leg. We told them to restrain him because he would wake up confused and angry. Well, ma'am, he certainly did that. And he hurt a few people on the way out. One of them was an officer, and that's a big problem. Is he in the house? If he was in the house, I said, I wouldn't have asked you where he was. May we come in? The man who should have pulled his weapon asked. Rick stared at the floor, but stepped to the side and opened the door wider. If he had not put the door between him and those men, he might not have made it either. I missed exactly what happened in the moment because I turned for the head of the stairs. and had my back to the constabularies. Had my back to the constabularies when it sounded as if the house had exploded. I heard the first blast. And then my ears rang nearly deaf for the muffled eruptions that followed. I saw splinters. Things had slowed down in my perception. I blinked several times and reached up for my ears because they hurt, and I thought they might be bleeding. That's when I saw crisp splinters spin through the air in front of my eyes. The ones that were wider and flat, more like wood chips, had white paint on one side. I believe those were from the wood being shaved off the door. The thinner, blonder splinters came from the railings. Trey tried to grab me and pull me aside, but he missed and tumbled over the chair. Rick had been sitting in a moment before. I ran to Trey's side because I thought he was hurt. As I ducked down, the face, the plastic face of a clock on the wall of Rick's living room. Obliterated. A couple batteries flew out, but there weren't many guts to the thing. Just broken plastic falling from the wall to reveal the bullet hole in the soft blue paint of that wall. I turned my head finally as Patrick strolled in, stepping over bodies half in the house and half out. Okay, Rick had asked us to dispose of Patrick's gun before we tried to get him to a hospital. Trey had made the comment, I believe it was Trey, that Patrick would just find another one. I think that's how he said it. He found a much larger weapon with a long barrel. He stepped around the door, the damaged door, to see Rick sitting against the wall, covering his ears with both hands. He stepped around the damaged door to see Rick sitting against the wall, covering his ears with both hands. Then he raised the barrel on Rick. I screamed at him and stepped on Trey as I ran for the stairs. My voice was muffled inside my own head and ringing ears. I felt like I was still moving in slow motion, running in water, running in a dream. There was no way I was going to get there in time. All right, there was no way I was going to get there in time. I kept waiting for the blast as my feet tangled on the stairs. I was curious if it would be loud or muffled. Like the screams hurting my throat. I rolled on my shoulder as I lost my footing on the last 2 steps. My hand slid through a layer of blood on the tiles of the foyer. Okay. Leaving handprints as I crawled. Leaving handprints as I crawled, I forced myself into the small space between Rick's knees and the hot metal of the weapon. I braced myself for the pain as I reached up to push the barrel aside. Patrick dropped it before I could and knelt in the mess on the floor in front of me. I wanted to scream at him. All he had to do was, I wanted to scream at him. All he had to do was stay in the hospital until he was well. That was all. Rick said it would be fine, but Patrick had to go and escape, maybe before he was even Well, I did not know what these constabularies wanted, but they had not threatened us yet. Rick had told stories about how the riot busters of this world sometimes behaved, but that did not mean they needed to be killed for simply asking questions. But Patrick took me into his arms and cried into my shoulder. I was staring at the bodies as the sound of sirens drew close enough for me to hear, even through the ringing in my ears. What happens when they get here? Trey yelled. I think his hearing was damaged. Too. Rick looked more lively and awake than he had since before he got the call about his parents. He looked around and said, "They're going to arrest all of us." Patrick stood and wiped his eyes as he helped me to my feet. He wouldn't look at the other men as he asked, "Trey, are you charged up enough to get us out of here?" "Yes." Patrick led me by the hand past the bodies and Rick on the stairs. "Rick," I turned around and reached for him. He gave one more terrified look at the floor, and then followed into the living room. Patrick looked at Rick and then at me. Is he coming with us? What? Rick asked, and took a step backward. Trey pulled up his sleeve and said, "If you want to stay in this world, you'll need to step farther back than that." Rick didn't move. Patrick said, "You need to make a choice. Those Claxtons what am I trying to say here? Claxons. Guess that's it. Let's see what a synonym of that is. No idea. Okay. I believe that's another word for sirens. Alright. Those Claxons are getting closer. What? Hold on. I asked, what happens to you if you stay? Rick. He looked around and said, "I can't even go to their funerals because of all this, because of how this year is." I mean, with the police, I said. Rick's eyes went wide, like he just remembered what had happened. He had been through a lot since we got there, and an awful lot in the last few minutes. "I'll go to jail," he said. "They'll probably send me to fail. Come with us, Trey said. I don't. I'm... Hurry up and decide, Patrick growled. I punched his shoulder and he winced harder than I should have been able to hurt him. You made this worse, Patrick. We're not done with you. But you let him decide. He helped us and he didn't have to. Patrick closed his eyes and bowed his head. I can't ever come back if I go, Rick said. Trey stepped forward and said, "You've had nothing good to say about this world since we got here. Go go with us to find another." That's not... Trey added. This world took your parents too. You simply hope someone different wins the next election. But I'm telling you, once a nation slips into tyranny, it doesn't just slip out. Come with us and help us find a world that hasn't slipped yet. Okay. I'm not sure how loudly he said it, with my ears ringing, but there didn't appear to be much strength behind it. It was good enough for Trey. Let's find brighter days, shall we? Patrick's head popped up like he had just woken up. Let me get the gun. No. I grabbed him by the front of his shirt and shoulder. He cried out in pain this time. Trey activated the technology inside his skin before the world wavered around us in that familiar way. I lifted my bloody hands away from Patrick's chest. I thought it was from the floor, and I had gotten it on Patrick's clothes. But then his knees buckled and his eyes rolled up in his head. As we ripped away from Rick's world, I realized he had been shot. Alright, there we go. So we got our characters out of that world finally, and we'll move the story along. Okay, it's going to be a different world, so I don't need that. So we're doing chapter 18 next. Chapter 18, and that is going to be Advanced 4, Roman Shift 11. And I am at 37,532, so I'm over my word goal for today, and I get to stop on a fresh chapter, so that'll work out great. Alright, let me take a look at some of the other authors as I get ready to put in my word count. So we are 37,532, 37,532. Alright, 37,532. Okay, so 37,532, and I am very happy about that. We update our progress, and we are continuing our streak. Now I want to take a look at a couple different authors and see how they're doing. I may not do the whole group of buddies that I normally go through, but I want to look at a couple in particular. So first, let me look at Chuck Buda. All right, Chuck Buda is still moving right along. So he is at 12,658. He's had to write in bursts because with work and everything else he's got going on, he's having to write when he has time. Now, what I'm very proud of him about is that he hasn't given up because NaNoWriMo just isn't really in his wheelhouse. It's not the way he normally writes. He does it because he wants to participate with the other people who follow along with the Mondo Method podcast with him and Armand Rosamilia. So he plays along to be a good sport. Corral of Blood is a story he was going to be writing anyway, and he's already said he expects to go into December in order to finish this. So that's perfectly fine. One thing I wanted to look at is I don't think I've done a good enough job of selling how much I really like that series. So the Son of Earp series is a 4-book series right now. Corral of Blood will be the 5th book. The first book is Curse of the Ancients. When I read this book, I was certain that this was one of the greatest westerns I had ever read. Not just supernatural westerns, but one of the best western stories. Now, a lot of horror authors have gotten into writing westerns now. Deadhead Press does the splatter westerns that mix sort of extreme horror and other types of horror and supernatural with the western genre. This came out well before that stuff, and I was really hooked on it. The Hunted Gunslinger is good too. Summoner of Souls is excellent. When I read that 3rd book, I knew he was on fire. So probably the 1st and the 3rd are my favorites, but again, the more I think about it, I love The Haunted Gunslinger too, and then Desert Fangs really took it to another level. Getting to, I guess you can look at that cover and kind of figure out, what kind of supernatural trouble they're running into based on that title. But I'm looking forward to Corral of Blood, and I know other people who've read these stories really are excited about those too. Now, want to take a look at Armand Rosamilia's page, kind of see where he is. All right, let me get back. I always end up in a rabbit hole over here and then can't find my way around. All right, so looking at Armand Rosamilia too. All right, he is writing The Devil's School. We're at 37,331, so he's doing very well. He and I are basically at the same spot, just about 200 apart. We're kind of following the same pace, trying to be done on the 20th. He said he may end up stretching to the 21st, but we'll see. So doing a great job on his. Wanted to look also at some of his work. He and Chuck Buda said some very nice things about me on their Midway live broadcast. So they had the two of them, Armand and Chuck, and then a few other authors too, and they were just kind of talking about writing and NaNoWriMo and that sort of thing in general, and just said some very complimentary things about me. Some of it was about these broadcasts being encouraging, but then it was also about writing and things like that. And I have a lot of respect for these authors. So someone whose writing you really enjoy, speaking highly of you really means a lot. So I wanted to return the favor. Of course, we just mentioned the Son of Earp series by Chuck Buda, which is one of the greatest Western, and especially Western supernatural series I've ever read. One of the things they were talking about are the collaborations I've done with Armand Rosamilia. We've written a ghost story together. We've written a few other things together, and we really do enjoy working together. And he had mentioned that he when he writes with me, he tries to up his game to match me. Now, what he doesn't give himself credit for is that as he's doing that, he'll send a chapter back to me, and it'll be one of the greatest things I've ever read. And I'm like, wow, I need to really bring my A game to this, so I'll try to up what I'm doing. He ups it to match me, and I think we end up writing some pretty amazing books together that we could not have written as well apart. Now, he and I had done some projects where he and I, a couple other authors, did sort of a weird horror thing. It was kind of a fun thing, not terribly serious. But we were talking about possibly working together. And the moment I knew that I wanted to work with Armand Rosamilia was when I read Chelsea Avenue. I love all his work, and he often calls himself a pulp writer, which I think to him means that he just goes direct into the story. So like his his crime fiction and thrillers work pretty well because he doesn't put a lot of fluff into them. It's just very story, character based, and moving forward. When I read Chelsea Avenue, I saw a different level to his work. I saw that a level of sophistication that he was capable of with stories and characters and twists and things like that that just made this book something different. And again, I don't want to compliment this book in the sense of like saying it made his other work look bad, because I was already a fan of what he did. But when he came out with this, I knew he was capable of a lot more and that he was beginning to achieve it, and I wanted to be a part of that. So we ended up writing The Enemy Held Near together after I read Chelsea Avenue and saw the level of sophisticated work he was capable of. One of our recent works is Yard Full of Bones, and we have sort of cosmic horror and brings in sort of the crime fiction, detective, mystery kind of stuff too. So we didn't set out to do a blended genre thing. We kind of knew what the main story was going to be about, but then it evolved into something much better that I think really comports us pretty well. Right now, this book on ebook is only 99 cents, and it's going to be that way through Cyber Monday, I believe, which is right at the very end of November this year. But you can pick that up on the cheap, and then we'll trick you into buying more books from us and that sort of thing. But just wonderful job with that, working with him. And he and I have another book coming out with Madness Heart Press in 2021 called Room 138, which is a bit of a sci-fi novel with some mystery and some intrigue to it and some things like that. So I'm really proud about that one and looking forward to that one coming out as well. So that one should be coming out soon. But wanted to take a moment to talk about these guys and what a great job they are doing. We'll get back to everybody else in a future broadcast. So I'll run through everybody's NaNoWriMo pages and see how they're doing, but wanted to focus in particularly on Armand and Chuck this time around. They said some nice things about me, and I just wanted to let everybody know what they meant to me as well as friends, but also as just really talented authors. So wherever you are in your NaNoWriMo writing, or if you're just trying to reach goals that aren't even related to NaNoWriMo, just keep pushing at it. Chuck is a good example of, life gets in the way, and sometimes the 50,000 word mark is in a month is not in a person's wheelhouse, but you get done what you can, and if it takes you 2 months or 3 months and you do your best work, then that's good too. So just encouraging everybody who writes to continue writing and enjoy the process, even on days when you're pushing yourself, days when you don't quite feel like it, and then the more work you produce over time, the better that work will be. So thank you everybody for following along, and I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow.